On September 17, 1787, the Constitution of the United States was created. At that point in our brief history, America was scarred by both the tyranny of the British rule and the anarchy of life under the Articles of Confederation. The framers of the Constitution attempted to find a middle ground that would create peace, stability, and prosperity for all Americans in the future. Our Constitution consists of 7 articles explaining the rights and responsibilities of the federal government. The first article discusses our legislative branch, which consists of the Senate and House of Representatives. They have the right to propose new laws, to raise armies, to declare wars, to make changes to the Treasury, all of which are important things in running our country and creating order and stability. Each state is represented by 2 senators in the Senate, and the amount of representatives in the House is allocated based on population. This is to make sure that the states with low populations still get significant representation in the Senate to protect their freedom and right to self-determination when the government makes laws that affect their regional interests. Our second article, it describes the executive branch, which includes the president and his or her cabinet. Presidents are elected every 4 years through the popular vote and the electoral college, in which representatives cast votes. Some Americans believe that this process infringes on the freedom of urban Americans, who are usually more liberal-leaning, to have equal representation in choosing their leader. In 2016, Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but lost the Electoral College. As a result, the Republican candidate Donald Trump became the president. Many left-wing groups felt disenfranchised by this because the Electoral College disproportionately allocated votes to rural areas, which tended to lean conservative. The third article describes the judicial branch of the government, the Supreme Court and the federal courts. Unlike officials in the legislative and executive branches, federal judges are not subject to term limits. Having term limits for 2 of the branches, but not for 1, is another way to protect our freedoms while still providing order and stability. In the executive and legislative branches, having term limits prevents someone from becoming a president or senator for life, which, as we've seen in places like China, Belarus, Russia, it leads to dictatorial tendencies and consolidation of power, which infringes on our freedoms. However, since justices are appointed by the president, placing term limits on the justices would be effectively giving the president control of 2 branches, executive and judicial, which is again too much consolidation of power for one person. And since through judicial review, which the judicial branch serves as a check on the president's power, that would not work if he controlled both the executive and judicial branch. So as a result, allowing justices to serve for life protects Americans' freedoms by preventing one party from having too much power. It prevents us from having effectively a regime change every 4 years. Meanwhile, Article 4 of the Constitution requires that states must respect each other's laws. This was a way of providing stability, contrary to the previous government under the Articles of Confederation, where states were basically given sovereignty, and it led to almost anarchy. This has been controversial because on some conscientious issues, states' rights advocates argue that enforcing Article 4 deprives them of their right to self-determination. In 2015, same-sex marriage was legalized nationwide after a series of lawsuits by gay people whose marriages were not recognized regarding adoption and inheritance, even though they had registered their marriages in states where it was legal. According to the prosecution, denying their marital rights was in a way denying their freedom. However, according to the defense, which was represented by the state governors and state legislators, the state governments had the freedom to define marriage as they saw fit. The fifth article states the process by which the Constitution can be amended. The process itself was not controversial, but the reach of certain amendments, especially those after the 13th, is controversial with some conservatives because they curtail the freedom of states to self-govern. However, they protect individuals from oppression by state governments. The sixth article proclaims the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. This reaffirms the freedoms granted in the Constitution by ensuring that no further law can deprive Americans of them. This ensures that this protects our freedoms and makes sure that they cannot be stripped away by any future power-hungry leader. Article 7 discusses the ratification of the Constitution. This is obviously not controversial today, but at the time, many felt that it infringed on their freedoms because rather than requiring the agreement of all 13 colonies, it only required the agreement of 9 states. This was seen as infringing because they felt that every state should agree to ratify it, or else the states that did not ratify it would be basically being governed by the Constitution without their consent. To conclude, the Constitution is remarkable both today and in its time period. It had, in years bygone and even very recently, we've had countries that have no clear democratic process, no clear separation of powers. We've had the entire governments be overthrown due to the transgressions of the previous president or king or other leader. This does not happen in America. In America, we have checks and balances and a formal impeachment process to ensure that if changes need to be done, it will be done by the ballot, not by the bullet. And while, of course, many have disagreed over the Constitution scope and where it applies, most famously throughout the years, many people have disagreed on what defines life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when we say all people are created equal, do we really mean that? Is that being enforced into practice? This has been said countless times, whether the issue was slavery or gay rights or abortion or women's suffrage. It's always been raised. However, one significant aspect of the Constitution is that even though we may disagree, the Constitution gives us the freedom to agree to disagree and to have an avenue of change for our grievances. And for that, America, I salute you. Thank you.